So, welcome to the latest episode of Film Night, the podcast where we discuss double bills and what films match up well over a certain topic. Today's topic is Teenage Kicks, a rock and roll themed teenager kind of adjacent films. We've both picked two films to bring to the table, and we will debate which two of these are going to finally end up in the double bill at the end. What are your thoughts on the theme first, Matt?
Thoughts on the theme. So I think, obviously, in your description you said rock and roll. I'm going to twist it a little bit for mine, and I'm going to go for a different genre of music, a more relevant one to my teenage kicks.
I think that's fine. Rock and roll was more...
Yeah. But I think... you using the rock and roll term is appropriate because obviously rock and roll, at least in what we think of as I suppose a media savvy generation, really, as like 50s onwards, is really the birth of youth music. There was other things before that, jazz in the 20s and stuff like that, but I think if something where radio was relatively available, there were movies you could go to on a regular basis and things like that. Rock and roll is really what kicks everything off. But I've chosen something a little different, unless you happen to pick one of mine, and then I might have a little shot.
So I've gone. Both of mine are rock pop adjacent.
Yeah.
Both very much are of a period, the late 90s to early noughties. And I think both films are very of their time that I've picked, although one in certain areas I think would have probably been more popular if it was made in recent years than when it was made.
Interesting.
Just for certain themes it picks and goes with. But yeah, I think this is a kind of theme where you could ask people from lots of different generations and you're going to get very different picks. I think for a certain generation you'd get people picking a film like Quadrophenia.
Yeah.
Even Tommy.
Definitely. Or even going back a bit further than that, you've got the movies that the Beatles made, movies that Elvis was in, taking it to the rock and roll title, obviously. It's a very interesting one. Obviously, for any viewers watching, make your own. Comment and subscribe below, and tell us what your personal teenage kicks double bill would be. But I think we'll start with ours. Who's to go first, James?
We'll let you go with your first film first.
Okie doke. I'm going to go in chronological order then. Not that there's a big difference, because my preferred two that were released 1 year apart from each other. So I'm going to go with the first one, which is Human Traffic.
Oh, it's not a film I've seen or know anything about, I don't think.
So, obviously you're probably aware of Trainspotting.
Yep.
So Human Traffic was a film that sort of cashed in on the aesthetic and the feel and the tone of Trainspotting. It didn't come out that much later, I don't think, because I think Trainspotting was, 97-ish? Something like that? Yeah, something like that.
Sounds about right.
And Human Traffic came out in 99, and in the UK and Europe there was the dominant music at the time was dance music, or what people might refer to as like EDM now, as a more general encompassing thing. I was really into my dance music, and in 1999 I was 16 turning 17.
Were you into house at the weekend?
I was definitely into house at the weekend, and in fact house all week long, to be honest. It was what was in our CD players in our cars if we had cars, and by the time I started going out on a regular basis to clubs, The film was available to rent in the local video rental store, and it would have been a video at the time, although we might have had it on DVD. I don't know. And I specifically remember this film because it was when I was still technically in school, sixth form, so the second year of sixth form for British viewers. So that's 18 for international viewers. We would go out every weekend, at least Friday and Saturday, and then some nights in the week as well. And a friend of mine who lived over the road from the school, so we'd go to his house most days when we didn't have classes, and either playing the PlayStation or watching a movie or something like that. A friend of mine and I, we were there at his house, and we decided, you know what, let's have a weekend off. Right? We've been to the clubs like every week now for as long as we can remember. Let's relax, just have I think his parents were away as well, so we were just going to chill out, get a Chinese, get a couple of beers, sit down, watch a couple of films, job done. So we went to the video store, we rented a couple of films, and one of those films was Human Traffic. And by the end of the film, we had an itch and an urge to go out like I cannot describe. It was almost like an addiction. It was a need to leave the house, a need to go to the club and dance and listen to some music and just to be absorbed in that atmosphere. Because I think for those who haven't seen Human Traffic, it's the story of a group of friends who decide to go out for one last big banger before they all have to go their separate ways for whatever reason, whether it be jobs or university or this, that and the other. So they have a whole weekend of just partying, and it's music that defined that generation, and there's an atmosphere that defined that generation. And there was obviously there's a lot of drug taking in the film and things like that, and there's some more serious sides of it in this that don't necessarily reflect my experience of that time. But I think the way it manages to capture at least the musical essence of that period and the way that music can make me feel, there's very, very few films that have come close. So that's my pick. So Human Traffic.
For you, it's a slice of a certain time.
It's a slice of a certain time. As I say, it doesn't completely represent my experience, but I think there's a certain something about it, and it it really, as I say, the way it made me feel, we had no intention of going out that night, absolutely no intention, and yet by the end of that film, we both felt the same. We kind of looked at each other and went like, we've got to go out. There's no option. We have to go out. And I believe we did.
Okay, so my first film is from 2001.
Mm-hmm.
It is a film I'd never seen. I didn't really have much in the way of desire to see it, but a while back I was watching a comics podcast, and this is a comic book movie, I will say as well.
Oh, interesting.
I was watching a comic podcast called The Wednesday Club that I watched a lot at the time, and a few of the hosts on there loved this movie and spent a good chunk of an episode just describing it and why they loved it so much. So I was like, you know what, it's time to go and watch it. I now have a soundtrack on CD because at the time it wasn't available digitally when I watched the film, and have the film on DVD because it's still not had even a Blu-ray release. But this film is from 2001, and it is the Josie and the Pussycats movie.
Oh, wow.
It is a cracking piece of satire, of musical satire.
Yep.
Some brilliant original songs written for it. You have a perfect lampooning of American 90s boy bands of the NSYNC variety.
Yep.
with some amazing songs. One including about a boy who's trying to sneak into his girlfriend's house via the back door without her parents finding out. And this song is entitled "Backdoor Lover."
Yep, I know it well.
Yes, but the whole film is a criticism of crass consumerism.
Yep.
You've got these young rock stars who want to make it big, and they lose their way in the record industry and how the record industry wants to market them. All the cast, you've got so Josie, the Pussycats are Josie is played by what's the name?
Rosario Dawson, isn't it?
No, Rosario Dawson is one of the Pussycats, along with along with Tara Reid.
Oh yeah, Josie is. Yeah. She was.
We should probably be better prepared for this show, you know. But
we probably should, yeah. But I mean, she was a big star at the time. She was in
Rachel Lee
She's
Cook.
All That. Yeah, Rachel Lee Cook.
Yes,
I'm sure that's her.
It is Rachel Lee Cook. Yes, we were right. And then you've also got the villain, played by Parker Posey, delivering an outstanding performance. And you've got Alan Cummings as well.
Yeah, I mean, the two of the seminal roles, really.
Yes.
And I think it's one of those films that it's oddly. It's one of the greatest examples of films of that generation. In that, on the surface, it's a throwaway, like schlocky, easy watching movie, but there's some incredible satirical performances in there. As you say, amazing music, and a decent social commentary as well.
This is the film I was mentioning when I said while it's very much of its time.
Yeah,
I think it would be better appreciated, released today, and I think more and more people are discovering it again, and kind of applying that kind of modern lens to it makes people realise it wasn't just.
Yeah, I mean, I think a modern K-pop version, with a good satirical, cynical view, because obviously, like, there are issues behind the scenes of K-pop, obviously, but it's got that lovely, fun energy to it on the surface that you could really make quite an interesting remake.
Yeah, it's quite fun. Obviously, Josie and the Pussycats themselves have recently shown up in things like Riverdale and
Sabrina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I believe a Katie Keene spin-off as well, because different takes on Archie comics are big again.
And why not?
Yeah, but I feel like Josie is one of the ones that got there first.
Oh, it certainly did. It certainly did. That same video shop that I referred to in my first pick, I later got a job there, and actually it was one of the the first releases of when I was working there. It was within the first few months, and so and because the company at the time paid for an entertainment license, it meant that we could show films in the shop on the TV screen that was in the corner of the room. And so Josie and the Pussycats was one of those ones that actually it got played quite a lot.
It's it's a film that I think when it came out of the 2001, so I would have still been in high school.
Yeah, I mean, I was depending on exactly what point in the year it came out, I was 19, I think.
Yeah, so I left high school in 2005, so I would have been 16 in 2005.
Yeah.
It's probably came out before I really got into music, because before I found my teenage genre and the music that I attached to.
Yeah, I suppose before music became important.
Yeah, but even when music did become important to me, at least for that first few years, I would have been way too po-faced and serious to enjoy a film like Josie and the Pussycats.
you would have come of age during the emo years, wouldn't you? So,
just before I'm weirdly before emo hit big, I came of age during the skater pop punk.
Were you skater pop punk and the end
fair.
of new metal?
Yeah, new metal into punk into emo. And let's be looking back on it in hindsight, there is very little difference between that entire kind of scene.
Well, they just start to feel more sorry for themselves. They wear slightly tighter version of the same clothing, and they just feel more sorry for themselves.
I can even remember how, like, being a punk fan, My Chemical Romance were like, nah, don't listen to that. Yeah. But now looking back, if I'm going to pick a band from that era, I'm probably going to put My Chemical Romance on because they were very good.
They were. All right, so that was your first pick, and a very worthy one.
We're both on very different tracks.
Incredibly different tracks.
Yeah.
Incredibly different tracks. My second one, not that, although I think it's your turn to choose your second one first.
Yeah.
My second one lies somewhere between my first one and your first one.
So I feel my second one pairs well with my first one. However, it's not as bubblegum.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as it's a film about music fandom more than it is about the performance of music. Much like you saying you work in a video store. It is a film about a shop. It's very much of the 90s, and it pulls influences from things like early Kevin Smith films would be influential on it, as well as the music of the time. The American alternative rock, we would say, is what kind of fuels it, and it is Empire Records.
Oh, really? You went for that one?
Yes.
When you were in your lead up there, I thought you were heading towards High Fidelity, but
no, I've not seen High Fidelity, or I may have just watched it very late at night and don't remember much of it. But Empire Records is absolutely got a stacked cast, but of a cast very much in their early years.
Yep.
It has just because again I'm terrible with names. Renee Zellweger.
Yep.
It's got Liv Tyler.
Yep.
Robin Tunney.
Mm-hmm.
The men in it tend to have faded away more than the women in it, to be fair. But it is it's one I probably didn't watch in the 90s. I think I watched it for the first time maybe 6-7 years ago. And then rewatched it a couple of years ago. And man, it's a weird film. It's very much of like it's teenagers being teenagers. Like watching it through like adult eyes is you do have a feeling of like, why is no one supervising these kids?
Yes.
Because this record store has an adult manager, right? And it's just like, what are you doing with yourself?
Yeah. But then I think obviously you referenced Kevin Smith there. I think maybe there were some Kevin Smith influences, but it's probably more so that there were John Hughes influences.
Yeah, there's a lot of John Hughes influences as well, I think.
And really, if you look at the John Hughes films that John Hughes is probably more famous for, it's all about teenagers saying, ignoring
maybe that's
their elders.
The thing, maybe it's John Hughes for that 90s kind of don't care about anything.
Yeah,
youth kind of.
They were in that era. There was certainly a void by the lack of John Hughes style films. Really, there were people who tried, but I don't think there was that auteur, I suppose, in the same way that John Hughes.
This film came out in 1995. Directed by Alan Moyle. who I'm not sure what else he's done.
Mm.
Yeah, not done a lot actually.
Yeah. So when was it you first watched it?
Like I say, it probably would have been, I'd say potentially about 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Which feels like a weirdly specific number to be guessing, but
Yeah. But yeah.
And yeah, it's a day in the life of a bunch of teenagers who work at a record store that is potentially wanting to be bought out by it's a small independent store, but a big business potentially wants to buy it out. So
that classic tale.
There's themes there linking to some other themes of Josie and the Pussycats, but approaching it from a different perspective. This is for the teenagers. This record store is their life. It's everything they've got. There's some tale of money getting stolen or borrowed.
Yeah.
And how all the dramas of their lives as it plays out in this record store, and the owner of the record store who just lets them kind of get on with it in the store. I think part of his few mind is at least they're not doing any harm if I've got them in here. But the drama escalates and it all ends on a nice rockers music and dance party on the roof of a record store.
As you'd hope it would.
Yeah, and it's another film where not much really. It's another one of those kind of films of that era where not much really happens. It's about the interactions of the characters more than any real plot as such.
Well, again, I mean, if it is influenced by John Hughes films, I mean, what really happens in Ferris Bueller? Nothing.
And as we all know, the villain of that film is Ferris Bueller.
Correct. A good second choice, and it certainly does work well with your first one. I think it actually sort of works well because it's a more serious tone. It sort of works well with my first choice as well, actually.
Yeah.
But shall I go for my second one?
Yeah, please enlighten us.
Possibly, in fact, no, not even possibly. Definitely the silliest choice of all four today, even after you've mentioned a song called Backdoor Lover.
Oh.
Go with Kevin and Perry.
Oh,
Go Large.
Not where I thought you were going there.
No, where did you think I was going?
I thought you might be about to say pop star. Never stop stopping.
No, you see, Pop Star Never Stop Stopping, or whatever it is, it's amazing, but it is not for my taste in music. Or it obviously, I mean, I'm a similar age to Sandberg and crew, so like for them, obviously their music of that era was hip hop and
Beastie
things like
Boys
that, so.
and things like Beastie Boys and
so for him and his team, something like Popstar makes perfect sense. And obviously, if there was an American equivalent podcast to ours, there's a good chance that someone choosing their pick would have gone for Popstar. But no, I went for Kevin and Perry Go Large as a sort of a 1-2 punch with Human Traffic. This is a lot sillier. It's got a lot more simplistic jokes to it. Human Traffic is very funny, but as I say, it's also quite. It can be quite dark at times. It does deal with issues of drugs and stuff like that as well. Where
be upfront, not a film I am a fan of,
and I can perfectly understand why.
Weirdly, though, I'm not sure it's a film. Like obviously there is a slight between me and you. There is a slight gap in generation.
Yeah,
we're at different ends of the same kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a
elder millennial.
Well, I'm a Zennial.
Elder millennial. That's the term.
I can identify as I wish, James. I'm a Zennial, whereas you're like at the other end of millennial spectrum, really. So we have similarities and differences, and it's quite interesting because obviously you think that a film like this does perfectly capture that moment in time. And I remember going to where it's something that you wouldn't necessarily have experienced. Go on.
Well, for me, Kevin and Perry, it's of a certain time that Kevin and Perry became a catch-all and popular enough with, potentially I'd say my parents are a bit younger than your parents.
I think your dad's a similar age to mine, but I think your mum was
I think my
younger.
dad's a fair bit younger than your dad, but might be a similar age to you. My dad, he's 65.
Oh, yeah, he's the same age as my mum then.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, Kevin and Perry was of a comedy that they would have certainly watched, and their friends as well. So, Kevin and Perry became this catch-all, kind of like, if you were a teenager being teenage, I was in a room where your parents were like, oh, you're just like Kevin and Perry, and I think it gave a slightly kind of like rebellious streak against Kevin and Perry.
I get you. I think for those watching who may not be aware of what Kevin and Perry was, there were a series of sketch shows in the UK that were all made by the same people, but one of them was Harry Enfield and Friends, and one of their more popular sketches within the sketch show was Kevin and Perry, who were teenage best friends, boys. Kevin played by Harry Enfield, the title lead, and Perry played by Kathy Burke, so a woman in drag playing a teenage boy. And as with all teenage boys, they are gross, disgusting, and only really care about boobs, beer, and in this particular case, their music. And yes, they were kind of people who were well into their 30s, if not 40s, playing teenage boys at this point. So they had their own cynical views of what a teenage boy was because of a mixture of their memories and what their own children were like and things like this. So Kevin and Perry as characters were popular with parental age people at the time. But the film, whoever wrote it and directed it and did all the research for it, and they went to town on it. They took these perfect caricatures of teenage boys and put them in a moment in time, again, that about club music, about dance music, and in particular the holiday that everybody went on or wanted to go on at that period of time. Ibiza, yes. The dance capital of the world, a sex and drug fueled den of euphoria that people would go on and just dance and dance and dance and dance and
potentially
dance.
Still a very British youth desire to go to Ibiza,
Yes.
I think, compared to potentially viewing it from a British American biometric. Obviously, I think Europe in general, if you maybe, but
I think it's famous within the EDM world in America, but I think because it's so easy for us to get there. I remember it was a little bit after my time. Once I'd pretty much stopped going to clubs on a regular basis. Anyway, there was I think it was actually British Airways, so who aren't a budget airline in any means, but British Airways did a £30 return to Ibiza. Oof. Where it was flying out on a Saturday morning, and it's only like a 3-hour flight.
All night.
You do an all-nighter in a club, and then you fly back on Sunday afternoon. And
I remember being.
I mean, that's how culturally significant it was that they would that even British Airways would bother to put on a flight that cheap. I mean, you didn't get any luggage allowance as well, as far as I'm aware.
As a kid, we went on some family holidays to Ibiza for a few years on the trot, not to the home of dance music in Ibiza, but like some of the more family resorts.
The older island, the older part of the island, where there's castles and ruins.
But we went on a trip to the city where the dance music is popular. But obviously, it was a trip that we attended during the day.
Yeah,
the whole place is like a ghost town.
Yeah, I mean it's still somewhere I want to go, but I think it would be one of those things that like I'd spend if we went for a week, I'd spend the majority of the time on the old island. And
Yeah,
then
you just do like a night in.
I'd have one night of tasting my youth again, and then like have to have 2 days to recover.
I mean, I think your brain would be confused. So you'd be there, and you'd be like, "Why is it not raining and muddy? This does not feel like a music like." Because you're so used to British music festivals, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I think it was a film that me and a friend of mine went to see at the cinema, and similarly to my experience of Human Traffic, it was one that made us want to go out. That is as funny and as silly and as it was something that really, as I say, did its research, did its homework as far as the culture goes. They got a prominent DJ at the time to do the soundtrack and kind of bring together all the tunes and mix them together and do remixes and stuff like that. So it was a fantastic film. Lighter than Human Traffic, I suppose. In many ways, possibly that the antidote to the likes of Human Traffic, and especially Trainspotting, which was sort of in that era as well. So yeah, it's probably one that's aged really badly. I haven't watched it in quite some time.
I've not watched it since I would have been a kid when I watched it. Yeah,
I mean it's got some very, very crude humour, but also not necessarily crude in the right way. Because I think since then we've had the Seth Rogen era, who is just as crude, but does it with a slightly different kind of tone to it. And I think because obviously Seth Rogen, a relatively young man who, when he was making those sorts of films like Pineapple Express and things like that, he was of pretty much the correct age. Whereas obviously Kevin and Perry, it was older people looking down almost.
I also think a lot of American comedy, even comedy on the cruder side of things, and I think I might touch upon this on a later episode as well, that would be relevant to a choice, is always tempered with heartwarming moments. It's always there's always a moral through it. While I think British comedy films, especially British comedy films born out of sketch comedy, you really Kevin and Perry Go Large is a 1.5 hour long sketch.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like, because we don't have that many films that are born out of sketch comedy. It's not like, say, the going back to Popstar, where Saturday Night Live has birthed so many films that are either directly based on their sketches or are made up of the teams that would work on Saturday Night Live. And then,
a fair few of them would fit into this topic. So you've got the film based on the Jim Carrey bobbin sketch, which I forget the name of. Roxbury.
A Night at the Roxbury.
Yeah, it's okay.
Which, to be honest, actually, is probably the closest to an American version of Kevin and Perry.
Actually, yeah, I think you're right there.
Yeah, it's probably the American answer to Kevin and Perry.
I like the sketch more than the film in that respect, though. I do like the sketch more than the film.
I love the film. But like, I love that as well. If you play Just Dance or just watch some Just Dance videos on YouTube, the official Just Dance video for that particular song, for Hadaway's What Is Love, is a parody of A Night at the Roxbury with the head bobbing. So that's well worth looking at.
Before we move on to the debate portion of this, honourable mentions of films you think would also fit into the topic?
Honourable mention. So my backup choice, just in case you chosen one of mine, as unlikely as it was the original Hairspray.
Oh.
So not the movie from the 2000s that was based on the musical that was based on the film, but the original film. For because I think actually in my mind it was made in the 80s, but it was the possibly the purest interpretation of your description of the topic, because it was literally about rock and roll. It was literally about the importance of the music to a generation. But it also dealt with some very important social topics as well, including segregation and body positivity. So that was my backup.
I had another mention in my mind about 10 minutes ago, and it's completely escaped it. However, Grease.
Yeah.
Obvious choice. Slightly problematic messages these days, but it's Grease. It's a classic for a reason.
I mean, there are problematic messages, but it's also, again, like, I think, and again, getting onto a completely different topic, but it is not only a film of its time, so a film made in the 70s, but it's a film talking about the 50s.
Yeah,
and it was a very different time then, so we can't necessarily judge all of the content.
And you're nostalgic. This is a discussion for a completely different show, but nostalgia happens in kind of 20-year batches.
Yeah.
Like, we're slowly starting to get nostalgic for the 90s again. I won't be surprised if soon we start getting nostalgic for the noughties, right? It's just that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I'm not sure there's a lot to be nostalgic about the noughties for, because I think part of the nostalgia is that you're looking back on a more innocent time, right? And I think potentially with the noughties and everything that happened within that decade, it may. But discussions for another time. On to the inclusion of what is going to be in our double bill. It's a weird one, this episode, because I think your first choice is coming from a very different angle to the other three choices we have to play with to a certain extent. It's a much more, from what I've not seen it myself, but what you've said about it, it feels a much more serious film than the
it is
other three.
I mean, as I say, it's kind of train spotting light or diet train spotting. So it is certainly serious, but with a fun edge to it. It does deal with some serious topics, but in a, at least for its time, a realistic way. Like it wasn't being overly cynical. It was just being real. So in that space of a weekend of them partying, there was some serious moments, some hilarious moments, and everything in between. So it's a beautifully balanced film that I think actually probably does get a little overshadowed sometimes because Trainspotting exists, really. But then I doubt it would exist without Trainspotting. So, yeah, I think. I mean, mine work very well as a double bill anyway.
I think we're at this weird juncture with this episode where we've both crafted very good double bills, and I'm not 100% sure mixing and matching them works.
You see,
I think you could compare Kevin and Perry with Josie to a certain extent.
You see, I'd potentially go with those two, just because I think if you're after a lighter evening of entertainment, that they both have certain levels of social commentary in them, but it doesn't go too heavy.
Yeah.
So that like you can, it won't feel ultimately shallow. That actually, maybe Josie and Kevin and Perry are the one to go for. Or if you want something with a bit more heft, then obviously you go the other direction, and you can have Human Traffic and Empire Records.
Yeah, because Empire Records does deal with some serious tones as well on depression and things like that. It very much through the lens of Teenage Angst, but it's definitely there. Or if you've got plenty of time, watch all four, or maybe on different nights.
Different nights of the week.
We recommend 2 double bills this time round, if you've got the time.
I think if we have to narrow it down, though.
Yeah, if we're narrowing it down.
If we're going to narrow it down,
Josie and Kevin and Perry.
We'll go for Josie and Kevin and Perry. I'd probably watch Kevin and Perry first.
Yeah.
Because it is probably the more intense of the films as well, especially with the type of music that's prominent.
I think it also gives you a taste of a certain time period, right, in both Britain and America.
Yeah, because they're not terribly dissimilar in their times of release. I think Kevin and Perry, as I said, was 2000. And Josie and the Pussycat was 2001.
Yeah.
It? Yeah. So they do. Yeah, I suppose they're within a similar time period, and it gives you a nice idea of the differences from across the pond. And on that note...
Which means, while enjoying this film, you can enjoy it with the American cinema classic popcorn.
Yep.
And the British cinema classic pickled onions.
Correct.
A bag of pickled onions.
Just a bag, or a jar.
Yeah.
Because I mean, let's face it. If you take yourself seriously, you've probably got a jar of them, or even pickled eggs.
Pickled eggs are particular delight.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
It is a problem. It is one of the slight problems with cinemas over here. There is always the distinct scent of pickling when you go inside of them. But it's a smell I just equate to film personally.
I mean, pickled egg flavoured popcorn. It sounds a bit weird, but it grows on you. And on that enlightening note, or was it a big fat lie? I think we'll call it a day, James.
Aye, we'll see you on our next episode of Bear Does Film Night.
Yeah. And until then, have a good time. Enjoy the double bill, whichever you choose to put together, with it be it our choices or even one of your own. See you again.
And if you do come up with some of your own choices, let us know what they are.
Yeah. Like and subscribe.
Thank
you.
Sure.